Mishna is Bava Kamma, Parak Dalit, Chapter 4, Mishna Aleph, Mishna 1. Okay, this is gonna be there's gonna be a lot of calculations here. It's a bit complicated, so we're gonna go very slowly. Shor shanagach arba v'chamisha shvarim zeh zeh. An ox that gored 4 or 5 other oxen, one after the other. So it's one person's ox, and he gored, let's say, 4 other oxen, each one belonged to another person. Yeshalem la'achrin shebehem. He pays the last one of them. We're just reading the words right now. Got this animal, and it gored a bunch of other animals. So who do you pay, says the Mishnah? You pay the last one. Now, you have to figure out what that means exactly. I mean, if you think about it, your animal went ahead and gored all of them, right? So you're obligated to all of them. At the same time, though, if we're talking about a shar tam, right? We're talking about the shar that's a tam that you only pay half damage for, and the payment only comes from the body of the animal, right? Then there's only a limit to how many people can take collection from the body of the animal. And therefore, the question is, what does it mean exactly? So what's exactly going on here? So this is how the Bartanur explains the case. Okay, so what we have here is number one: if an ox gored 4 or 5 oxen, one after the other, while remaining a tam. Okay, that's the discussion here is revolving in a case where the animal is a tam. Now, if it gored 4 or 5 times, then after 3 times it shouldn't have been a tam anymore; should have become a muad. Yeah. However, the case here is that it remained a tam. Why is that? Because if your animal gores 100 times, but you're not warned about it after each time, then it stays the same. That's the halacha. It has to be that after each time that it gored, you are warned in Bezdin about it. And if that didn't happen, then at the end of the day, we can come and have witnesses about how your crazy ox is goring all these other oxen, but it's only going to be a tam, because without being warned in Bezdin, the status doesn't change. Okay, so that's the case. That's the case. All right. Now, so the Mishnah says, Yishalem la'achrin shebahem. Its owner pays the half damage payment to the last victim, and the others not receive anything. Now, they're not receiving anything because basically, whoever gets payment from this animal, right? And you only get it from the body, so there's only so much you can collect from this animal's body, depending on the case. So now, but what's exactly going on here? But here is where it gets very interesting. This law applies. So again, the point of the Mishnah is the last guy's going to get his payment. The other guys aren't going to get anything. This law applies in a specific situation, namely, where each victim seized the ox that gored in order to make sure that he would be paid. Just get the case here. Just wait, hold on and get the case. The case is that each victim seized the ox that gored to make sure that he gets paid. We've had this before. That means, so this animal went and gored animal number 1. At this point in time, the owner of the animal has to pay from the body of the animal half the damage for the animal that was gored. In order to make sure that this guy, the victim, the one whose animal got gored, in order to make sure that he gets his pay, he seizes the animal. He takes it, which he has a right to do. Now let me read a little bit further. Now, once it is in his possession, meaning once the victim, as we'll refer to him, took possession of the animal, he is responsible for any damage it does later. If you seize the animal as for your payment and you seized it, you now become responsible for the animal.
Not the first
guy. Now let me read you a little bit more background here. Each victim was afraid that the owner or the previous victim, don't forget, right? This story, as we're going to say, is going to repeat itself. Okay? Each victim was afraid that the owner or the previous victim might hide the ox that gored and thereby prevent him from being paid, since payment is collected only from the body of the ox. That's what he's concerned about. He's concerned that the animal is going to be hidden. He's not going to have access to the animal to get payment. Therefore, each one seized the ox so that he would be able to keep the part of its value that is due him and return the rest to the owner. Right? I mean, if Chatzi Nezek, if the whole animal, if the animal is more than the Chatzi Nezek, then you seize the animal, you sell it, take your payment, and give the rest of the money back to the owner. But once he seized the ox, once the victim has seized the ox, he becomes its legal guardian. He becomes its shomer, who is responsible to make sure that the ox does not do any damage in the future. Thus, as far as the original owner is concerned, he is responsible only for the first goring. After making the half payment for that goring, he may keep everything that remains of the ox's value after the payment is deducted. You follow that? If, however, the ox did each goring while still under the original owner's guardianship, he would be obligated to make all the half-damage payments. He would be obligated to make all the half-damage payments. He'd have to pay the first victim. He'd have to pay the first victim first, the second victim second, and so on. The value of the ox is used up. Meaning, the point is like this: we have the owner and the first victim. So he has to pay chatzi nezek. The owner has to pay half damages of the first animal that was gored from his animal that gored. Now, this victim did not trust the owner, and therefore he seized the animal. And he seized the animal to make sure that he gets the payment from it. And let's say the animal is worth more than the chatzi nezek and the half nezek, then the remainder goes back to the owner. And who is responsible? It goes back to the owner. Now, the person who now sees the animal, he becomes responsible. He's a shomer. He becomes responsible to make sure the animal doesn't gore. And if the animal now does gore another animal, who's responsible for it? Not the original owner, but the guy who seized it, the guy who took over the animal. Mm-hmm. Now, essentially, before the story continues, what you have here is the first owner and the first victim. The payment of the half damage comes from the body of the animal that the victim seized. The rest goes back to the owner. I mean, that just would have been what would have happened. The thing is, though, as we're going to see, this story keeps repeating itself. Meaning, the person, the victim number one, right? Because he was a shomer, he's responsible for the animal. What did the animal do? Gored victim number two. Who is responsible for victim number two? Victim number one. And victim number two sees the animal. After he sees the animal, he now becomes responsible.
They sold.
They didn't sell yet. This is all happening before that, right? And this story keeps repeating itself until it finally ends. Until you have the last guy who sees the animal. He's victim number 4, let's say. And he sees the animal, and he watched the animal. He makes sure the animal didn't do anything. Okay? He makes sure the animal didn't do anything. So let's read further. Okay? After the ox gored the first time, the victim seized it. Thus, when it gored the second time, it is the first victim, not the owner, who must pay. The second victim then seized the ox from the first victim. Right. Thus, when it gored the third time, the second victim must pay. The third victim then seized the ox, and so on, and so forth. If the half-damage payment due each victim is the same, for instance, 100 zuz, that's what's due to each victim. Mm-hmm. The owner owes 100 zuz to the first victim, who owes 100 zuz to the second victim, who owes 100 to the third. The last victim, however, does not owe anything since the ox did not do any damage after he seized it. Thus, only the last victim gets to keep his payment, i.e. 100 zuz of the animal that he seized, while the others receive nothing. Mm-hmm. Okay? They seize nothing. They get nothing. So really, what's happening here is that the owner of the animal is only responsible to the first victim. But the first victim, let's say 100 zuz. But the first victim is responsible to the second victim, 100 zuz. And then so on until you get to the last one. There's no money. So the last one, now don't forget, this ox is still alive, all right? And the payments come from the body. So the last victim, who doesn't owe anybody anything else, he keeps the animal. He doesn't owe anybody anything. He's owed, right? The victim number 3, let's say, right, who was responsible for the animal's goring victim number 4, for his animal, right? So it comes out, he's the last guy on the line owed 100 zuz. He's not responsible. He doesn't owe it to anybody else. And therefore, he keeps it, assuming that the animal is only worth that 100 zuz. Next, the next part of the Mishnah is going to talk about, well, what if the animal was worth more than 100 zuz? What happens then? Okay, but this is where we're up to right now. So one last thing before we sign off. Okay, we have a case where the original owner, you had the original owner, you had victim number one who seized the animal. Let's say victim number one didn't seize the animal. He didn't seize the animal. And it was remained with the owner, and the owner didn't watch it, and it kept on goring. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? It kept on goring. In that situation, he is responsible to all of them. Yeah. Now, at the same time, though, so what's going to happen? He's responsible to all of them. So who gets payment? Who gets first dibs at the animal for payment? Victim number one. Why not? Okay. He was the first one that got it. His animal was gored first. His animal was gored first. I became responsible to him first. He gets first dibs. So he takes the animal now. If the animal, if he has to take the whole animal for his chatzi nezek, he takes the whole animal. If he doesn't take the whole animal for chatzi nezek, then whatever's left over will go to the next guy. And depending on what the value of the animal is and how much you can extract from it to pay everyone, that is what will continue down the line. But that's not the case here, because our Gemara says you pay the last victim. The last victim gets to keep it. Yeah. That's because the case is a different case, not because the one owner is the one owner over the animal responsible for the gorings. It's because each victim seized it and he became responsible for the gorings, and therefore it is only the last victim who wasn't responsible to anyone who at the end of the day is going to keep the animal and keep the animal for payment. Again, assuming that the animal, you need to take the whole animal for the chatzi nezek payment. Yeah. Okay, to be continued. Right. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now the first